It was a cool summer night towards the end of July, the time of year when the weather boils your thoughts to the consistency of sludge, the midpoint where parts of you wonder where the time is gone and the other part wonders what to do with what's ahead. Now, I hardly ever smoke, but there are some days where I'm strained to the point where I find myself puffing on those cancer sticks. This was one of those nights. On the off chance I do light up, I go into what I call a philosopher's daze, sitting all hunched over on my stoop, looking up at the crimson sky, following the gentle wisps of smoke as it dissipates in the air, all while thinking about life. How I got to where I am, who fucked it all up, why I didn't just get a single cheeseburger instead of a double, you know, the usual. At the same time that I'm inhaling chemicals that shave precious years off my life expectancy, I look over the house across the street. There's always something that happens there that piques my interest. This night in particular, I saw an old TV set sitting in the middle of the boulevard. Like what people do when they want to get rid of useless junk. It was in rough shape. The screen was cracked in some unfathomable way that one can only guess as to how someone could manage that kind of damage. The dark gray plastic faded into a pale greenish color from too many years in the sun. It was a piece of shit. Half-acidly, there was a bright sheet of paper stuck on the front of it. BBR, scrawled in chicken scratch across the front. Now, any competent person would have simply written free, but we're not dealing with your average Joe. He did this kind of stuff all the time. It seems every few weeks there's some odd end sitting out there with a cryptic message stuck on it. If I'm feeling ambitious, I can sometimes guess what it might say. Never really knowing for sure with the guy, but I feel I can come close. Harley was the peculiar man that lived in the house. It was a sad green color that you could tell was once vibrant in its heyday. Never the prettiest color, granted, but at least it wasn't this ambiguous, peely, pukey-looking slop that it is now. The siding that the paint was caked on looked like it was just begging to be put out to pasture. While every neighbor had a smooth cement driveway, his was reduced down to pebbles with a dinky, musky car to top it off. He is definitely the reason why the neighborhood's value has depreciated so much. The house has been the exact same since I first saw it. Granted, I've only lived in Meadow Springs for a few years, but by the looks of it, it probably hasn't changed much. The man himself was an eccentric little gremlin, looking somewhere between young and middle-aged. His hairline receded faster than a senile elderly woman's gums. He wore these thick, doofy glasses that enlarged his crazy man's eyes, topped off with a filthy whitish-brown tank top covering his swollen beer belly. Not exactly a prize by anyone's standards. No one really knows much about him, as he doesn't leave the house much. Rumor in the neighborhood goes that he had a wealthy uncle that passed on an enormous inheritance to tide him over for the rest of his days. Yet, old Harley is never around to corroborate it. Harley seems to just sit around all day. From my front step, I can see him sitting in the living room, completely still and absorbed. Colored lights flicker across his lenses in what I could only imagine is a completely encapsulating television program. I've always noticed a pattern in his head movements. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Constantly. The entire time. He looks at the screen with the curiosity of a broken child, only to bow his head like a priest. What the hell is he doing? He's always done this, and I'm not sure why. Every Wednesday afternoon, a big yellow truck pulls up to drop a few bags of groceries at his doorstep. The delivery man rings the doorbell before retreating to his truck like a soldier in war. Always a few minutes later, some pale greenish arms reach out and pull the groceries in like predator attacking its prey. Same goes for the mail. The box is right next to the door, so his sickly hands can fumble their way into violating the box. The only times I ever see him leave the house is to drop things off on the boulevard. They're all old and sit there until some self-righteous neighbor collects them to throw away themselves. Otherwise, his dinky little shipmobile roars to life every once in a blue moon, where he travels for a short time to some unknown destination. Surprisingly, the few times I do see him, he seems completely content. He walks tall and proud and with a spring in his step. Doesn't fit the description of someone who's miserable now, does it? I've always found his signs to be interesting. I'm not a particularly brilliant person, but I feel a sense of self-satisfaction whenever I can decipher his messages. Probably the average person could pick them up quicker than myself, but it's one of the things that makes me feel like I have at least a smidge of cognitive ability. I found his messages can be put into two categories. One is a reference to the state of the object, and the other, more interestingly, is a message about the object itself. One day, he placed a dusty, scraggly-looking lamp out with a sign reading NNB. It took me a couple cigarettes of pondering to figure it out, but I believe it said, needs new bulb, owing to the blackened filament slowly decaying in its glassy prison. My proudest achievement was when he placed an oversized Bible with a message reading HBTN. Using any sort of IQ I had, I like to think the acronym spelled out, Hallowed be thy name. While most of his items were in some way in disrepair, I was surprised to see the Bible was in acceptable condition. Well used, but not abused. I've been in his house only once. I remember during one of my philosopher's dazes, I saw him collapse out of his usual chair. He was sprawled out and convulsing rapidly. I remember instinctively dashing straight through his front door as if I lived there. Crouching down and holding him steady, I got a good look at his situation. To my surprise, there wasn't just one television, but several. All of them on different channels and with the volume on. It was chaotic. As I knelt, I could feel something uncomfortable under my knee. Lifting it to inspect the offender, I saw a well-worn clipboard covered in paper. I was only able to see it for a split second as the convulsions began to pick up. His mouth foaming and eyes deader than a pound of hamburger, and his forehead pissing blood all over. I was able to call an ambulance, but it seemed to take half an eternity for them to arrive. By the time they did, he was starting to come to. As I stepped aside to let the paramedics do their work, I took another look around. This house was much nicer on the inside than out. A bit on the bare side, however. His living room sat two well-lived-in recliners, and a dusty, almost faded love seat lived in the corner beneath the window. You could easily miss it if you weren't paying attention. A quaint little coffee table sat on top of an antiquated rug. The floors were wood-paneled and surprisingly kept neat. Looking into the kitchen, it looked well taken care of. The walls were pretty plain, aside from some outdated wallpaper and a few generic paintings. In the hallway heading towards the bedroom, I did notice a framed photo that I assumed was a younger version of Harley, along with another person, but I can't be sure. Aside from the many television sets, you wouldn't suspect anything was off about this house. Part of me wishes I would have explored more. The paramedics had to take him away to the hospital as he fell headfirst into the coffee table, leaving a nasty gash in his cranium. I stuck around until all the emergency personnel left the scene, leaving me alone in his house. This would have been the perfect opportunity to get a better idea on this guy's story. However, the thought of snooping through someone's house weighed heavily on my conscience, so I ended up just going home. At the very least, I wish I would have looked at that photo a bit closer. I never did hear anything more about that event. Harley never thanked me or spoke anything about it. Later on, I saw him proud as day with his fresh scar, taking care of some yard work, but that was about it. In fact, I'm not too sure if I ever heard him speak before. In any case, the whole incident stuck in my mind. What was he watching? What was he writing about? Since then, I've taken more of a notice if he's sitting in that living room. Every once in a while, when I come back from work or spend some time outside, I take a small glance to see if he's still there. And sure enough, 90% of the time he is. The same up-down motion. The few times I didn't see him, I pictured him to be either out and about or crumpled on the floor, croaking. In one of my fugue states of sitting out on the stoop pondering everything, I couldn't help but think about the meaning in all this. While most people his age are busy raising their families and advancing their careers, He is simply watching television. Endless TV, all day, every day, that he never tires of. I'm not a psychologist, but it almost seems that he is perfectly content living this futile existence. And perhaps I'm wrong about this, but I can't help but wonder, what does he get out of it? I took to the internet to see if I can come up with anything about him. Not much. He didn't have any social media, and anything news-related was written over a decade ago, which were mainly just his name mentioned in an obituary. I did, however, stumble across something that confused me more. I was able to find his name in an old phone book that I had laying around. I only ever knew his first name from some neighbors. Who knows how they even got that out of him. After looking through all the names in the book, there was one Harley, and his last name was Michelson. I searched the name up, and the only thing I could find was an old review board. Interestingly enough, it was a doctor review board. And, sure enough, when I clicked on it, his bright, happy face appeared right in front of my eyes. Dr. Harley Michelson, neurologist. A short bio described him as a dedicated and knowledgeable researcher who earned his MD in 2001 with high honors. His reviews start around 2005 and suddenly stop around 2007 and are consistently positive. Supposedly he was reserved, yet smart and personable. His last review saying something along the lines that they were saddened to hear that he left his practice. You could imagine my confusion to find out that this mysterious person that I lived next door to for 5 years was a former physician. Confused with this knowledge, I headed back to my front step, cigarettes in hand. Lighting one up, I could see him sitting in there. The sun had set, and the only thing illuminating his room was the obnoxious lights flickering off the television. Weird. The next day, I went into work. Now, I work a job that isn't particularly entertaining, something I wish I would have known before I went to college for it. But it pays the bills, you know? The family is also proud of me. Programming and coordinating events is one of those things that immediately gets others interested. Just by taking a look at my childhood, you could see the roots. Every birthday party I've had since I was 3 years old were planned out by me. My parents gushed at how adorable it was that their 3-year-old son was bossing people around for his The Wiggles-themed party. As I grew older, I naturally gravitated to that path, but once I started doing it professionally, I grew sick of it. Planning something out for myself and for my friends is one thing, but planning out a retirement party for Betty, the ancient relic, it's too much. Some of these people who commission me wouldn't be able to tell their ass from their elbows if it weren't for me. Stuff like that really gets to you over time, and it begins to drag. I've found that just the littlest things get you distracted. Believe me, when you're not engaged to begin with and find out that your weird-ass neighbor is some highly intelligent individual, really gets your brain spinning. I was in the middle of bartering with some hotshot has-been musician whose only meal is the corn he picks out of his own turds. But no matter how hard I tried, my mind couldn't stop wandering. As I went home, I ran into one of the elderly neighbors, Matilda. She looked like she had just crawled out of the crypt for the first time. Now, I don't normally see her. She's a lot like Harley in a way. Her mailbox is located right next to her door, so she seldom leaves her house. I can usually see the door slightly open with some spindly, pale, sickly hands extending out to collect the mail. You'd think she was allergic to the sun or something. But besides the oddness, she's a nice lady. She was one of the only people to greet me when I first moved in, and we do converse on the odd chance we run into one another. We caught each other up on a few things. Nothing special, just work-related, family, you get the gist. I had an idea hatch in my thick skull. I could ask if she knew anything about Harley. It'd hardly hurt now, would it? So, as I'm a sly little devil, I mentioned something inane about Harley. Perhaps something about how he was hauling some kind of broken object out of the front, or of the sort. I was shocked as she actually knew something about him. Something that he used to be a pretty well-acclaimed neurologist that just stopped one day. But she doesn't know why. I asked if he was ever married, or if something happened to him, but she couldn't think of anything. She said he was always the way he was. The only difference between him now and then is that he doesn't leave to go to work. Of course, with this juicy information, I wanted to know about the TV sets. But since that would be too good to be true, she didn't have an answer. She said when she was a younger woman, she'd always seen him sat in front of the TV. Apparently, he had a few less back then, but who knows with this woman. She might not even remember her whole name. Still, though, I felt something kind of click. I kind of lost interest when she started berating him for it. Apparently, she feels that since he's younger and able-bodied, he should be out there doing some neurology, which I kind of agree with. He has the gift of few, but chooses to waste it. Apparently, it was the talk in the neighborhood a few years ago. She said people went up to his face and told him he's wasting his life, that he has no meaning or purpose. Apparently, some self-righteous douche even felt the need to snip his cable one night. The only reaction anyone could get out of him was how quickly he went out to investigate. Within hours, the cable company arrived and repaired it like nothing happened. Interesting. A few weeks go by, and another long day at work ends. Just before I entered my home, I saw him in his usual spot again. Sure enough, he's just there. Just straight chilling. I kind of forgot about him for a little bit, as per usual. But it wasn't too long before I got a couple beers inside me, which really got my mind going. In my slightly inebriated state, I had the brilliant idea of walking past his house. Genius, I know. So I threw on a pair of headphones, grabbed my shoes, put them on the wrong feet, and out the door I went. I slowed my pace as I went past his window, looking in from the corner of my eyes. Sure enough, there was that ridiculous wall of television sets going. You could hear all the noises meshed together like some hellspawn that's been grabbed by the balls. He sat there, all happier than Larry, jotting down God knows what on that clipboard. Basically, I learned absolutely nothing. I looped around the block and went by again. Same thing. I gave up and went back home. I didn't stay for long. A couple more beers later and my mind's going even more. At this point, all rationality was out the window. I was in the state where I could either give one hell of a motivational speech to some sorry sap, or go out and do something I'd regret later. Unfortunately for me, it was the latter. The sun was beginning to go down, so I came up with the ultimate idea. I'd knock on Harley's door. If I had any scrap of logic or rationality left, I used it up by thinking I should do it before it got too late. Not long after, I was right up at the door. I honestly don't even remember walking over there, but I did. I pounded on the door like I was summoning God himself, and sure enough, Harley answered. My bumbling ass nearly toppled over as the door swung open. I forgot how much I drank, and at this point it was all getting to me. I never met this guy, but looking at him gave me the warmest, fuzziest, and most amazing feeling ever. I was like a preteen girl meeting her pretty boy celebrity idol. I attempted to speak, but all that came out were slurs. The entire outdoors were spinning, and Harley attempted to speak. I'm not sure what he said, but something in me didn't like it. I could see the neighbors gathering around outside and looking at me from a distance. I believe I muttered something along the lines of, TV, what's on? How about them Browns? Oh, it wasn't long before I misstepped and fell right over onto his lawn. A gasp erupted in the distance, but that meant little to me. What did, though, was seeing Harley's door slam shut. Even though I'd have blown the roof off a breathalyzer test at that moment, even I knew I fucked up. The next morning, I somehow woke up. I was in the exact position I fell in, and had the absolute worst hangover to top it off. A terrible stench permeated, which I identified as vomit. I fortunately fell on my stomach in the prone position, which was probably the only thing that saved me. Absolutely nothing from Harley. He just went to bed or something. If I would have fallen on my back, it would have been curtains. I collected myself and did the walk of shame back to my humble abode. I was far too embarrassed to go into work that day, so I called in sick. The rest was just a mess. I got cleaned up, threw away the massive collection of beer cans, and shut my blinds. I felt so much shame that I laid flat on my back all day. I couldn't bring myself to even sit on my couch, as I was not worthy. "Fuck me," echoed through my brain the entire time. I gave myself a few days to recuperate. It was that bad. Finally, I decided to pick up what's left of my dignity and go back to work. I figured I'd just have to pretend that whole night never happened. And, it worked. I certainly never spoke with Harley after that. I'm sure a few neighbors witnessed it, and the slimy assholes left me there, but it was dead silent. After about a week or so, it didn't even bother me anymore. Strange to think, but it was almost like the concept of the tree. I fell down, and no one heard it. Therefore, there was no noise. September was just around the corner, and the nights were starting to cool off a little bit better. I went out for a smoke just as the sky was beginning to turn a hearty red. The clouds swirled by, turning pink with the ethereal background. I could see Harley right where I expected him to be. I guess the moment was just right. The mood was right, and the cigarette brought something out of me, but I went into another one of my ruminations. So Harley seems to be in there, all day, all night, watching that damn TV, taking some kind of notes. No one knows why he does this, but there's one thing for sure. He enjoys it. He thoroughly enjoys it. He's got a doctorate, has helped numerous people with their ailments. He has a decent-sized house, yet he is totally content with what he's doing. No one can appreciate it. They all bash him. Hell, even I bash it. Well, I got to thinking, and an even deeper thought came into my mind. What is the purpose of all this? What is the meaning of anything? I began to ruminate even deeper. We have this man who is not yet 40 years old and is living a life of futility. Does his life lack meaning? Everyone in the neighborhood seems to think so, but I honestly don't know. I mean, he enjoys it. There's some kind of net pleasure out of it for him. Who knows what the hell it is, but it's there. I've begun to develop some theories. One of them is that he has some kind of psychotic disorder and thinks the TV is communicating with him. I'm pretty sure I saw a photo of a woman in his house. Could that be her? Is he trying to speak with his lost wife? No, that's dumb. But maybe he is widowed? Still, no, I feel like I would have found something about it online. Well, what else? Maybe he's documenting something. Maybe there's some kind of government conspiracy that he's trying to crack. Again, just speculation, but what if it's actually because he wants to keep track of all the channels and build a guide to our time? That could be. But still, why would he do that? What meaning does he get out of anything? I took another drag on my cigarette, and another thought popped into my mind. What if he just likes it? I tried to think about my own life. What meaning do I get out of anything? I do what I'm good at, but I don't enjoy it. However, what I'm doing is productive. I produce a product for others, and he doesn't. Still, though, what he's doing must mean something to him. Maybe it's wrong, but does it matter as he only has himself to please? I can feel my thoughts jump all around, and my cigarettes get low. If there's some kind of net meaning, just to him, even with the wrong intentions, does he not have meaning? Gosh, I just can't wrap my head around it. The thing that sucks is that I may never know. I try to divert my mind somewhere else. The smashed TV with BBR is still there. Bashed broken remote? Busted button, right? Broken backside rapidly. I just couldn't figure out this acronym. I figure there must be the word broken in it. It's clearly in disrepair. I'm not yet done philosophizing, so I took out another cigarette. Just as I'm about to light it, my wiggly hands drop the lighter. I scavenged for it, but not even God knows where it went. Having to get on my hands and knees and fish for it under those dirty steps, it hit me. Not sure how, not sure why, but it did. Broken beyond repair. Makes sense. It does look broken indeed. But what the actual fuck does that mean?